A whistleblower just leaked the real reason why CarMax's CEO was fired. And it's not what the company told investors. We're talking about a $5.2 billion time bomb that's about to explode and take down America's largest used car dealer. Picture a company that's been cooking the books, hiding massive losses, and lying to shareholders about the true state of their business. The CEO didn't just make bad decisions. According to leaked internal documents, he discovered something so catastrophic that the board had no choice but to silence him before the truth got out. But here's what's really terrifying, Wall Street. The $5.2 billion isn't just CarMax's problem. It's connected to a web of subprime auto loans, fraudulent vehicle valuations, and accounting tricks that could trigger a collapse across the entire used car industry. The whistleblower claims CarMax has been selling cars they knew were worthless, financing loans they knew would default, and reporting profits that never existed. The leaked documents reveal a company in complete financial freefall, desperately trying to hide the truth from investors and regulators. Is CarMax's CEO firing just the beginning of the biggest auto industry scandal in decades? Or are we watching the first domino fall in a collapse that could wipe out billions in investor money? Step onto the CarMax lot in the late 1990s, and the difference was obvious. No haggling, no pressure, just a bold promise. The price on the windshield was the price you would pay. For millions of Americans, that single idea changed what it meant to buy a used car. Grandparents brought their grandkids to pick out a safe first ride. Parents traded in the family minivan, knowing they would not be outmaneuvered at the negotiating table. CarMax's first store, opened in Richmond, Virginia, quickly drew crowds. People lined up to see if the rumors were true. By the end of its first year, customer satisfaction surveys showed record-high approval scores, with buyers praising the transparent process and friendly staff. Word spread fast. Within 5 years, CarMax had opened dozens of locations across the country, each one promising the same straightforward experience. The company's early ads did not just sell cars, they sold peace of mind. No hidden fees, no last-minute surprises, and a 7-day return policy that felt almost too generous. For families burned by shady dealers and bait-and-switch tactics, CarMax became a symbol of trust. The brand's promise was not just marketing, it was a lifeline for anyone tired of feeling ripped off. Neighborhoods changed as CarMax stores popped up near highways and shopping centers. The lots were bright, the showrooms spotless, the staff trained to greet every customer like a neighbor. In surveys from 2002 and 2003, CarMax ranked at the top for repeat business and word-of-mouth referrals. Even skeptics admitted the company seemed to have cracked the code. For a while, it really did feel like a new era. The no-haggle pledge was not just about price, it was about respect. Buyers who once dreaded the car buying process started to look forward to it. For anyone who remembers that first walk through the automatic doors, the smell of clean leather, and the handshake that felt honest, CarMax's promise was more than a slogan. It was a contract, written in the memories of every family who drove off the lot, believing they had finally found a dealer they could trust. Beneath the polished showrooms and friendly sales staff, CarMax was powered by a financial engine few customers ever noticed. The company's promise of one simple price on every windshield didn't just win over buyers, it created the perfect data set. Every car, every sale, every trade-in fed into a centralized pricing algorithm, first rolled out in the early 2000s. This system didn't just guess what a car was worth, it calculated it, using national auction data, real-time market trends, and a growing mountain of customer behavior statistics. The algorithm set the price, and the price stuck, no matter who walked through the door. But the real innovation wasn't just in how CarMax sold cars, it was in how they financed them. In 1993, CarMax launched CarMax Auto Finance, called CAF, a wholly owned subsidiary that quietly became the company's secret weapon. By 2004, CAF wasn't just writing loans for prime buyers. It was targeting subprime borrowers too. The real breakthrough came in 2003, when CarMax issued its first asset-backed security, bundling thousands of auto loans and selling them to Wall Street. Investors snapped up these bonds, hungry for the promise of steady returns backed by used cars and monthly payments from working-class Americans. The process created a feedback loop. The more loans CAF originated, the more securities CarMax could sell. Each new pool of loans brought in fresh cash, which the company used to stock more inventory and open more stores. By the mid-2010s, CarMax's growth was fueled as much by finance as by retail. The pricing algorithm told the company what cars to buy and how much to pay, while CAF's loan book determined how aggressively they could lend. Everything was tracked, modeled, and optimized, at least on paper. All of this complexity was hidden behind the promise of a simple, stress-free car buying experience. Few customers realized their purchase was just one link in a chain stretching from the lot to Wall Street. The data-driven model worked, until it didn't. Deep inside the system, small errors in pricing or risk assumptions could ripple outward, growing with every new loan and every new securitization. The financial engine that powered CarMax's rise also created blind spots, places where trouble could hide for years before anyone noticed. The next chapter of the story would reveal what happens when numbers on a screen collide with the messy reality of used cars and human borrowers. Inside CarMax's finance division, the warning signs first appeared as lines of code and shifting numbers. A senior quant analyst, surrounded by monitors and risk dashboards, watched the gap between CarMax's internal vehicle valuations and real-world auction prices grow wider by the week. By late March 2024, the company's own models were assigning used cars values up to 28%, above what major auctions like Mannheim and Odessa were reporting. Screenshots from the valuation dashboard, time-stamped and circulated in confidential emails, showed a spread that had never been seen before. Hundreds of millions in theoretical value evaporating if anyone tried to sell those cars for cash. The analyst's job was to track portfolio risk, not to sound alarms. But the data kept getting worse. In Tampa and Dallas, two of CarMax's most active markets, appraisers were routinely logging values 18 to 32% higher than comparable wholesale sales. That distortion did more than skew the books. It fed directly into the asset-backed securities CarMax sold to Wall Street. Every time a subprime loan was bundled and sold, the underlying collateral looked stronger on paper than it was in reality. The interactive risk dashboards, built to monitor exposure in real time, began flashing red as the model recovery rate assumptions drifted further from actual auction results. By April, the analyst's reports showed a 24% year-over-year spike in loan loss provisions. Internal memos flagged a 40% sequential jump, numbers that could not be explained away by market volatility or seasonal swings. The analyst ran scenario after scenario, toggling between best case and worst case assumptions, but no matter how the model was adjusted, the gap would not close. The risk dashboard, once a tool for fine-tuning, had become a scoreboard for disaster. Screenshots of the dashboard, annotated with urgent notes, made their way to the CFO's inbox. The analyst highlighted a $5.2 billion discrepancy between CarMax's reported vehicle values and the prices those same cars could actually fetch at auction. The numbers were not just off, they were impossible. Vehicles repossessed from subprime borrowers, which should have been marked down to reflect real-world depreciation, were instead propping up the company's reported profits. The technical red flags were undeniable. Auction spreads, once a rounding error, had become a chasm. The analyst's risk models, designed to protect the company from sudden shocks, now showed a slow-motion collapse already underway. With every new data point, the sense of urgency grew. The numbers told a story the board could not ignore, and for the analyst watching the dashboards, it was clear. The time for quiet warnings had passed. Late on a Thursday night in April 2024, the senior analyst sat alone at a desk, the only light coming from the glow of a laptop screen. The numbers had already spoken. There was no plausible path left to fix what the models revealed. The $5.2 billion gap was not a rounding error or a temporary market blip. It was a chasm, wide enough to swallow the company's reputation and the savings of anyone who trusted its books. The analyst's inbox was filled with unanswered warnings, flagged reports, and polite dismissals from higher-ups who insisted the market would recover or that the algorithms just needed tweaking. But the risk dashboards kept pulsing red. Every hour, new data confirmed the worst-case scenario was not just possible, it was already unfolding. The decision came quietly, almost automatically. The analyst opened a blank email, attached the latest valuation spreadsheets, and wrote a short, direct message. Material discrepancies in residual value assumptions. Urgent risk to asset-backed pools. Requesting external review. The recipient wasn't a manager or board member this time. It was a well-known securities attorney specializing in whistleblower protections. At 2:14 in the morning on April 19, 2024, the message was sent along with a digital packet of annotated screenshots, internal memos, and a log of ignored escalation requests. The analyst's name was on every file. There was no attempt to hide the source. Within 24 hours, the law firm replied with instructions: preserve all records, avoid internal communications, and prepare for possible retaliation. The analyst followed protocol, downloading the whistleblower handbook from the SEC website and saving copies of all correspondence. Legal protections were clear on paper, but inside CarMax, the cost would be personal. In the days that followed, the analyst's access was quietly restricted. Colleagues stopped replying to messages. The head of compliance scheduled a sudden performance review. Rumors swirled about a leak, but no one named names. The analyst's badge still worked, but every swipe through the security gate felt heavier. The outside counsel sent a formal letter to CarMax's legal department, confirming that a whistleblower had come forward with evidence of material misstatements affecting loan securitization and vehicle valuations. The letter requested that the company preserve all records related to asset-backed securities, internal audits, and risk modeling. The analyst's actions were now a matter of legal record, protected but exposed. The chain of command had been broken. The story was no longer just about numbers or dashboards. It was about defiance and the personal risk of telling the truth when everyone else wanted to look away. As the news of an external complaint began to circulate in legal circles, the board's next move became inevitable. The analyst's decision had forced the issue out of the shadows and into the hands of lawyers, regulators, and soon, shareholders. The cost of silence had become too high for one person to bear. Now, the company itself would have to answer. Bill Nash walked into the boardroom with a folder of audit findings and a single demand: tell the truth. The numbers inside were not just uncomfortable, they threatened to unravel everything CarMax had promised investors. Nash had spent weeks pressing for answers, sending late-night emails to the CFO, drafting memos flagged as urgent, and calling for a new audit when the old models no longer made sense. But now, with the board assembled behind closed doors, he put it all on the line. The memo he handed out was blunt. It called for an immediate press release disclosing that there was a gap of $5.2 billion between reported vehicle values and actual market prices. Nash's words left no room for spin. We have a duty to shareholders to correct the record. Failure to disclose these material discrepancies may constitute securities fraud. The document included a precise timestamp, May 17, 2024, at 8:43 in the morning, and a demand that the company inform investors before the markets opened the next day. Board members scanned the memo in silence. Nash's tone was not just insistent, it was final. He warned that the company's continued reliance on inflated recovery rates and aggressive accounting for subprime loan portfolios had already triggered internal audit alarms. The memo referenced a 40% sequential jump in loan loss provisions, a 24% year-over-year spike, and impossibly optimistic assumptions about repossessed vehicle values. Nash's argument was simple. The data was irrefutable, and the risk of waiting even a single quarter longer was now existential. He closed with a direct appeal. We cannot hide behind models or market cycles. We owe our investors the truth. I am prepared to stand by this recommendation publicly. The room bristled with tension. Some board members, especially those with heavy exposure to CarMax-backed securities, whispered about reputational harm and the possibility of a catastrophic share price collapse. Others stared at the memo, realizing that silence could make them complicit. The ultimatum forced a moral reckoning. Nash's demand was not just about numbers. It was about trust, about the contract CarMax had made with every family who believed in its promise of transparency. The board had hours to decide whether to come clean or keep the truth buried. Nash's statement hung in the air. If we do not act now, we risk losing everything, not just our positions, but the company itself. At 7:56 a.m. on May 18, 2024, the CarMax board gathered behind locked doors. Phones were left outside. The agenda was short: address Nash's demand for disclosure and decide his fate. The official minutes, later submitted to the SEC, list only the participants and the time the meeting began. But according to internal emails reviewed by outside counsel, the discussion was anything but routine. Board members flipped through Nash's memo, some with red pens in hand. The language was direct: references to material misstatements, impossibly optimistic recovery rates, and potential securities fraud. The CFO remained silent, eyes fixed on the table. The chair called for a vote: immediate disclosure or removal. The tally was 6-3 in favor of containment. Nash was removed as CEO, effective immediately. The decision was recorded at 8:34 a.m., less than 40 minutes after the meeting began. A second motion passed without debate. David McCrate, a long-serving board member, was named interim CEO. An internal memo circulated within the hour, instructing staff not to discuss the leadership change or the specifics of the audit findings. The memo's language was cold. It stated that all communications regarding recent executive transitions must be routed through corporate legal, and that no public statements are authorized at this time. Nash was escorted from the building before noon. His email access was cut off, and his company phone was collected by security. The board's message was clear: no leaks, no explanations, no press. The same memo that sealed Nash's fate also included a clause barring him from speaking about company financials or ongoing audits. Legal called it a customary confidentiality provision. For those inside CarMax, it sounded like a gag order. The effect was immediate. Compliance officers reminded managers that unauthorized disclosures could result in termination. Analysts and risk managers, already shaken by the audit findings, began deleting old emails and avoiding any mention of the $5.2 billion gap. The Whistleblower's handbook, once quietly downloaded, now felt like contraband. Outside the boardroom, the mood was tense. Rumors spread, but no one dared to ask questions. For employees who had watched Nash push for transparency, the lesson was unmistakable: speak up and you are out. The cost of honesty had been set, and the company's silence was now official policy. The audit files landed with a thud on the conference table, thicker and more technical than anything most board members had seen in years. At the center of it all was the reserve debate, a high-stakes argument over just how much money CarMax needed to set aside for bad loans. The lead audit partner, flown in from the Big Four firm's New York office, sat across from CarMax's finance team, his voice steady but unyielding. He pointed to the spike in loan loss provisions, up 24% from last year, with a 40% jump in just one quarter. The numbers were not theoretical. They came straight from the books, line by line, region by region. The tension in the room was more than professional. CarMax's finance chiefs argued the spike was a temporary reaction to market volatility, not a sign of deeper trouble. They insisted the company's models, built on years of historical data, could weather a few bad months. But the auditors were not buying it. They had run their own scenarios, stress testing the assumptions that underpinned every asset-backed security CarMax had ever sold. The results were stark. If repossessed vehicles kept selling at auction for less than the models predicted, the reserve shortfall could spiral into billions. The heart of the dispute lay in the recovery rate, the percentage of a car's value CarMax could expect to recover after a borrower defaulted. Internal models, tweaked over the past year, assumed recovery rates as high as 65% for certain subprime pools. But auction data from Tampa, Dallas, and other high-default markets told a different story. In those regions, actual recoveries had sunk to the low 40s, sometimes dipping below 40% for the most distressed vehicles. The lead auditor flipped to a slide showing side-by-side comparisons, model versus market, expectation versus reality. The gap was impossible to ignore. When pressed, CarMax's finance team pointed to macroeconomic headwinds and argued the market would rebound. The audit partner countered with evidence from the past 3 quarters, showing that each time the company delayed increasing its reserves, the losses only grew. He referenced the $142 million loan loss provision booked in a single quarter, the largest in company history. The auditors wanted more reserves, more transparency, and a methodology that matched the facts on the ground, not just optimistic forecasts. As the debate dragged on, it became clear that the disagreement was not just about numbers. It was about trust. The audit partner's testimony, later summarized in confidential notes, left no doubt. CarMax's current reserve practices were not supportable in a rapidly deteriorating market. The files were closed, but the questions remained, waiting for someone willing to follow the evidence all the way to the source. In Tampa, a used sedan rolled into the appraisal bay with 90,000 miles and a fading paint job. The appraiser's screen flashed its algorithmic verdict, but the manager's voice cut in. "We need this one to book at $13,500. The number did not match auction comps, but the pressure was unmistakable. In Dallas, a similar scene played out. Field appraisers logged values that outpaced local wholesale prices by as much as 30%. Internal logs later referenced in audit files showed a pattern. In Sunbelt markets where subprime sales were hottest, appraisers were routinely asked to stretch their numbers. Over a 2-year span, trade-ins in Tampa and Dallas were booked at values 18 to 32% above what those same cars fetched at Manheim and Odessa auctions. The difference was not subtle. One email in the whistleblower's file quoted a regional manager saying, "If you don't hit the valuation targets, we can't make the quarterly numbers. Find a way." That directive traveled down the chain, landing on the shoulders of junior appraisers who knew their bonuses and sometimes their jobs were tied to how much paper value they could squeeze from every car. The consequences of these inflated appraisals rippled through CarMax's financial engine. Every overvalued trade-in became collateral for a new loan, and every loan was bundled into the asset-backed securities sold to pension funds and hedge funds. On paper, the pools looked solid, with high recovery rates and strong collateral values, but in reality the numbers were built on sand. When defaults hit, repossessed vehicles sold for far less than their booked values, shredding recovery assumptions and triggering a cascade of losses in the loan pools. Appraisers in the field became the unwitting front line of an accounting illusion. Many did not see the big picture, they just knew the targets kept rising. A few tried to push back, citing auction data and market comps, but those objections were quietly overridden. The regional patterns were clear in the internal dashboards. Tampa and Dallas led the nation in valuation spreads, with some months showing a 25% average overstatement on subprime trades. For investors, these distortions would soon become impossible to ignore. The numbers that once propped up CarMax's reputation were now a ticking clock, counting down to the moment when paper profits would collide with the reality of the open market. Phones lit up across Wall Street before the opening bell. Portfolio managers scanned the headlines, watching CarMax's stock price tumble in real time. By 9:45 a.m., the shares had dropped 23%, wiping out billions in market value in less than an hour. The news was not just another corporate stumble. For pension committees in Chicago, state retirement boards in California, and insurance giants from Hartford to Atlanta, it was a direct hit. CarMax-backed auto loan securities sat in retirement accounts, college savings plans, and municipal bond funds across the country. What looked like a distant accounting problem overnight had become a personal crisis for anyone whose future depended on steady, predictable returns. Emergency meetings kicked off behind glass doors in Midtown Manhattan and downtown Boston. Hedge fund risk officers pulled up their exposure sheets, tracing every line that led back to CarMax's asset-backed securities. Minutes from one pension committee meeting, later obtained by investigative reporters, captured the panic in plain language. Immediate review of all positions tied to CarMax asset-backed securities. Assess contagion risk. Prepare for forced liquidation if necessary. The tone was urgent, the stakes impossible to ignore. For retirees and public workers, the numbers told a brutal story. A 23% loss on a core holding could erase years of slow, steady gains. Some funds faced the prospect of cutting benefits or raising contribution rates just to fill the hole left by a single day's trading. Calls poured in from anxious beneficiaries, teachers, firefighters, city clerks, demanding answers their fund managers did not have. The losses were not confined to Wall Street. They rippled out to every Main Street that had trusted the promise of safety and growth. Hedge funds scrambled to offload CarMax-linked securities, but the bids evaporated as soon as the scale of the losses became clear. Screens flashed red. Traders whispered about a contagion event, worried that panic selling could spread to other auto lenders and consumer finance companies. In private memos, legal teams warned of possible lawsuits if it turned out that CarMax had misled investors about the quality of its loan pools. The shock was not limited to a single stock or sector. It was a wake-up call for anyone who believed that the numbers on their quarterly statements were built on anything more than trust, and a reminder that when the truth finally breaks through, no one is insulated from the fallout. Federal regulators didn't need a press release to sense trouble. By the end of January 2024, a pattern of late-night emails and encrypted calls had already drawn the attention of the Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC opened a preliminary inquiry, quietly requesting internal documents tied to CarMax's asset-backed securities, loan pools that now looked far riskier than the glossy prospectuses had promised. The agency's focus: whether CarMax's disclosures about subprime loan performance and vehicle values had crossed the line from optimism into deception. At the same time, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau sent a formal request for testimony. Their investigators wanted details on how subprime borrowers were being approved and whether customers were being set up to fail from the start. The CFPB's letter cited a spike in consumer complaints about repossessions and loan terms, but it was the internal whistleblower file, now circulating among regulators, that raised the most alarm. In one footnote, the analyst had flagged material misstatements affecting asset-backed securities recovery rates, a phrase that triggered automatic escalation inside both agencies. Inside CarMax, legal teams scrambled to respond. Compliance officers drafted talking points and combed through emails, searching for anything that might hint at deliberate mispricing or ignored warnings. The company's outside counsel advised strict silence, but the clock was ticking. Under Dodd-Frank, whistleblowers who provide original information to the SEC can receive up to 30% of any monetary penalties collected, a powerful incentive for insiders to come forward, and a looming threat for any executive who tried to bury the truth. Wall Street watched for signs of a formal enforcement action. Hedge funds and pension managers, already nursing steep losses, began fielding calls from plaintiff attorneys eager to coordinate class action lawsuits. The mood in the industry shifted from disbelief to dread. If the SEC or the CFPB found evidence of systemic fraud, the consequences would not stop at CarMax. Every lender, every auto dealer with exposure to subprime-backed securities now faced the risk of forced disclosures, restated earnings, and years of costly litigation. No subpoenas had landed yet, but the message was clear. The era of unchecked growth and creative accounting was over. The next move belonged to the regulators, and with it, the fate of an entire industry hung in the balance. Right now, over $1.5 trillion in United States auto debt hangs in the balance, with subprime delinquencies at a 10-year high. If systemic fraud infects the market's core, trust collapses, and the fallout won't stop at one company. In an industry built on confidence, every hidden risk is a match waiting for a spark. The real cost of silence? It's paid by everyone holding the keys.